And once you get to the top of the hill, you're never going to be satisfied because there's always somebody going to want to take your place at the top of the hill. The only way
Oh,
you
sure.
win, I mean, this is a cautionary tale. The only way you win is to stop striving and just be comfortable in your own skin. And the problem with Bette Davis's character
You ought
is
to
she's
be
not
in
comfortable in her own skin.
pictures. You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit.
Hello, everybody.
You ought
Welcome
to
to the
be
show. My name is James, joined as ever by my good friend Steve, and this is Every Best Picture, where we go through every winner of the Academy Award for Best Picture from Wings all the way to the present day. This episode, we are doing All About Eve.
Hey, but before we talk all about Eve, if you haven't already liked and subscribed, it would be a great favor to us if you did. Just go ahead and hit that like, maybe ring that little bell. That way you're notified every time we drop a new review. James?
Okay, so All About Eve is kind of a big hitter in Oscar land.
Yeah.
I think when it came out, it was the most nominated film of all time. I think it got about 14 Oscar nominations, which was a record at its time. So to talk about what the plot is, this is set on Broadway, where the great Bette Davis plays Margo Channing, who is a diva of the stage, who's is around her 40th birthday, and she's starting to worry that she might be losing her shine a little bit when she is introduced to Anne Baxter's Eve Harrington, who is a besotted fan. She's brought backstage by a friend. And she proceeds to sort of work her way into Margot's inner circle and then sort of take over, if you like. So it's that classic sort of tale of the student becoming the master, overtaking the master, and but done on the boards of Broadway. But obviously there are allusions to sort of Hollywood of the day and all the rest of it. There's a brilliant cast. So I think one of the sharpest scripts around at the moment. The screenplay, the dialogue, it's so satirical, it's so snappy, it's so barbed. It's all like the witty banter. And then there are kind of sort of these film noir elements to it as well. She has this shady backstory. She isn't as sweet and innocent as she thinks. There are kind of twists and turns that the story takes. And then, I mean, just to get right to it, it ends with the inevitability of everything coming full circle, and that it's all going to happen again and again and again to Eve herself. I think it's right up there. It's one of the greats.
James, this is the first time I've ever seen All About Eve, and I didn't even know really the premise. But I can say, coming off of 1949's All the King's Men, where I think the review we gave of that film was generally we liked it, very relevant for today, especially with the politics going on. It lacked some of that bigness and grandness that's required of an Every Best Picture. We weren't completely sure that it really stood the test of time. Whereas this film, I'm going to come out and say it at the beginning of a review, this film stands the test of time. I love how the 1950s starts out with a bang. This movie is brilliant. It is Machiavellian in nature. It is karma. What goes around comes around. Like, if you are the kind of person that is constantly striving to get to the top of the hill, then once you get to the top of the hill, you're never going to be satisfied because there's always somebody going to want to take your place at the top of the hill. The only way you win, I mean, this is a cautionary tale. The only way you win is to stop striving and just be comfortable in your own skin. And the problem with Bette Davis's character is she's not comfortable in her own skin. And so she's constantly having to perform to validate herself to others. And this film just brilliantly demonstrates that can easily be replaced, but the person that replaces you is also going to get replaced.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's a real Shakespearean quality to it in that regard. It's like sort of Macbeth or something like that.
Yes.
He does all of these things, betrays all these people, murders all these people to get to the top. And you realize it's like every gangster movie ever made. It's like once you get to the top, the only way is down. And then there's the target on your back. It just exposes you to everybody else, in the same way. And I think I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I think this film is absolutely brilliant, and I think it is pretty timeless. And I think the genius stroke of this movie was setting it on Broadway rather than in Hollywood. I think because I think it lends a kind of more timeless quality to it because they're surrounded by a kind of sort of artifice, the very theatricality of it. But you can also see that everybody watching it at the time, certainly the Academy members, they see it as a story about Hollywood, and they
Right.
love nothing more than a story about Hollywood. But just by setting it, just removing it, just that one little element, there's something about the theatrical experience that I think has not dated,
Hmm.
and that it is very much the same process as it was 300, 400 years ago. And I
Absolutely. We are not looking at a time capsule of a day gone by. This would be Hollywood and Broadway in the West End today.
Today, yes, and it would be, and very little would have changed. There'd be a few more lighting gimmicks maybe, but beyond that,
Right.
and I think that that's what the theater setting, the Broadway setting, sort of adds to it and brings to it. And then you've got the other element of it is I love the sort of the journalistic element
Oh
to it,
yeah,
is that
yeah.
it's George Sanders' critic who really is the entry point for her almost. He's like, I'm the one that's going to big you up. What are you going to do for
Yeah,
me? And I will make you
yeah.
the toast of the town. And George Sanders is just so duplicitous.
Oh,
His
he's
voice.
so wonderful in this film. I've even got in my back of my mind, do not forget George Saunders because
Oh, how
he
could
is
you?
my favorite character in this film. He is so suave. Obviously, we just saw him in, I think 1946, Rebecca. Forget the year, but
1940, 1940.
1940, we just saw him in Rebecca. George Saunders is wonderfully Machiavellian in this film. I just the way he delivers his lines, and you mentioned earlier how tight this script is. This script is so. I think he gives the line where they're talking about different auditions, and somebody says, "Well, what about television?" All television is auditions. I just thought, oh God, the lines in this film are perfect.
Wonderful. Which is what that's the sentiment that everybody must have been thinking in Hollywood at the time, with
Yeah.
the birth of television was just at that time, and they're like, is this going to be something that threatens us?
Re
But yeah, I mean, he
replacing.
will always be the voice of Shere Khan
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
Jungle Book for me. And so, everything that he says is just tinged with threat and
Yeah.
ominousness. So I absolutely love it. I really, really do. I mean, and it's just one of those sort of time old stories that has happened again and again. I mean, you see it
Yeah.
in movies like Showgirls, the Paul Verhoeven movie Showgirls,
Yeah,
which is so
yeah,
like notorious at the time. That's essentially the exact same story. It's just like
yeah,
the young, fresh-faced ingenue comes into town, idolizes the aging star, and proceeds to take her place,
yeah.
and that upsets absolutely everybody. It's wonderful stuff. It really
Safe
is.
to say that film wasn't as well received as All About Eve.
No, that's true. Although time has been kind to it. It must be said.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And when it came out, I did have a bit of an Elizabeth Berkley crush for a while.
Ah, you see, now I didn't know her, but she was like a child star. Was it Saved by the Bell or something like that?
Yeah,
Wasn't she
yeah.
in?
I think one of the reasons she did the film was to kind of break the stereotype she had of being in this teeny bop TV show.
Right, right. I mean, I was already a Paul Verhoeven fan, from obviously RoboCop, Total
Oh,
Recall,
Cup, yeah.
and Basic Instinct. But
Did he do Starship Troopers?
he did after
Yeah,
Showgirls, I think it was. I think that
yeah.
was his like course correction to try
Right.
and get back in people's good graces after Showgirls. But we
But
digress.
I was just going to say, but we digress.
Although I did want to make sure I mentioned Showgirls while we talked about this movie, because it would not exist without this film. Is this the first time we've talked about Bette Davis as
I
well?
believe so. I believe
Yeah.
so. Yeah, we
Now I
haven't
have
really
to
done a Betty Davis film.
No, I have to be honest and say that Bette Davis is a little bit of a blind spot for me.
Hmm.
Some of her great movies, I'm aware of them, but there's a lot that I know that I haven't seen, particularly
Hmm.
from her sort of golden period. The
Hmm.
Bette Davis that I'm more familiar with is the older, wizened, sort of whatever happened to Baby Jane
Oh,
era
right.
Bette
Yeah,
Davis,
yeah,
rather than her back in sort of the glamorous sort of 30s and
yeah,
40s and up to this period, unfortunately. And that's something that I've always been meaning to rectify. But
yeah, yeah.
I mean, jumping just quickly straight forward to, because one of the films that it was up against at the Oscars that year was Sunset Boulevard, which is
Okay.
actually a film
Which
that kind of touches on a number of the
Similar themes. Yeah.
same themes, yeah, because you've got Gloria Swanson there as Norma Desmond, and that whole movie is about the washed up former star
Yeah.
who has become a complete recluse and a shut-in and
Yeah.
created her own little kind of fiefdom,
Yeah.
within her mansion, and just the whole thing sort of decays around her. And here you get it's almost like Bette Davis's character Margot. It's almost like Margot, the character, has seen Sunset Boulevard,
Oh, right.
and wants to. It's kind of like, I don't want that to
I
happen to
don't want
me.
that. Well, you got to think about, James. This is 1950, and we are about 30 plus years into cinema. This is still very new. We're still in the first generation, but that first generation of the ones that got started in the 20s and the silents are now, obviously, some of them lost their ability as we moved into the talkies, but they're starting to reach the age where they are getting older, and they're having to think about, okay, we're not the young starlet anymore. So this is really the first time we're seeing, around 1950, people reaching an age that had maybe a whole career in cinema, but are now having to watch a younger generation come up behind them that you pioneered. Cinema is us. It's me and this guy and this girl. We were all doing this together, and now suddenly we're in a certain age and we're watching a new generation come through, and I can't help but think that this film was very timely for the period that cinema found itself in history.
Well, and also it's the boomer generation as well, right? It's the baby boomers, and I think that was an attitude that was being held up by everybody, regardless of what your industry was, regardless of what you'd done. There was the greatest generation who had fought in the war that Bette Davis is very much part of. And then you've got these young kids that are still kids and they haven't seen anything, they haven't seen the world, who are now coming of age and sort of threatening to take their place when I think the older generation feels that they haven't earned their stripes yet.
Yeah,
they haven't done anything. They've been mollycoddled. They have grown up sort of in the wake of the war, if you like.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of doubly frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
There's the fear of like, oh, okay, I'm past my prime. There are younger people, but it's younger people that arguably don't deserve it.
Right,
well.
Right. You got to think it gets. I do have to highlight, though, I don't think we're talking about the boomers here, because the boomers would have been about 5 years old. The boomers.
Okay, sure, we're a little bit early for boomers.
Yeah. We call it the silent generation, and the reason you don't know it is because they are the silent generation. It's my mom and dad. My mom and dad are not from the greatest generation, and they are not boomers. They are in that little middle area called the silent generation, and they just go with the flow. And I think that's one of the reasons my mom and dad never got into the Vietnam protests. They didn't get into the Beatles. They were of a generation just before the boomers. The boomers were the Vietnam protesters and the Beatles folk. But
that's my parents. That's my parents.
Yeah. So
born in the 40s, just right at the end of the war. Yeah.
It would behoove us to not mention this is one of the earlier Marilyn Monroe appearances. I didn't recognize her at first. My first thought was, that is a beautiful woman. And then I looked up on Wikipedia. Who is that? That's Marilyn Monroe. I didn't recognize her.
That's right. In one of her very, very early parts. I mean, she was still yet to become
the
Marilyn Monroe. I mean, Niagara was probably her first big one, which can't have been more than like a year or two away.
Well, you've mentioned Bette Davis being a blind spot. Marilyn Monroe is a blind spot for me. I've never seen the 7-Year Itch. I've never seen Some Like It Hot. I haven't seen a Marilyn Monroe film, if I'm honest. And so this is the first time I may be seeing her on screen.
Oh, wow. I mean, she's one of those people who did a lot more than I thought, because there's kind of like the 5 or 6, there's 7-Year Itch, Some Like It Hot, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, The Misfits. Right. They're the ones that you're kind of like, Bus Stop Niagara. They're the ones that you're like, okay, yeah, she did those, but did she do much else? And I'm looking at her filmography now, and there's like 25 films on there, and I know I haven't seen them. I think I've seen those big ones. I think The Misfits is the big one I haven't seen.
Okay.
But I've seen, I mean, have you not seen Some Like It Hot?
I have not. And I think it's available on one of our streamers. It pops up occasionally. And so I think I gotta watch it. Yeah.
That's absolutely brilliant. One of the greatest comedies of all time.
Is that the one with Jack Lemmon?
Yeah, Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis have to hide They basically, the premise is they witness the St. Valentine's Day massacre,
Okay.
and so they have to go on the. They are no, they go on the run from the mob, and they go in disguise as women in Candy Cane, Marilyn Monroe's character's all-female band that is going to Vegas. So they get on the train, dress as women, and become like. So there's a kind of Tootsie element to it, where
Right,
they
right.
become like best mates with Marilyn Monroe, while Tony Curtis is similarly falling in love with Marilyn Monroe, and they go hide out in Vegas while the mob is looking for them. Essentially,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, very
it's
cool.
brilliant. Yeah,
I
it's
gotta put that
brilliant.
on my. Yeah, I gotta watch that. I'm gonna watch that. But we digress again.
We do.
Uh,
We try to digress yet again. I mean, it's one of those movies that's kind of just it's great, but it's like, what is there to say about it really, other than yes, it's awesome. It's almost perfect. You just
well, we haven't mentioned Anne
bathe in
Baxter
its
though.
bathe in its glory. Yeah,
But we haven't mentioned Anne Baxter yet. I mean, and she
true
plays
that.
the
True
very
that.
conniving. The thing, the role I know Anne Baxter from is the Ten Commandments. I grew up, as I said, as an evangelical Christian, and that was one of the, that was one of the required viewing as an evangelical Christian growing up in America. We all watched Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner. Moses, Moses, Moses.
Uh-huh.
But Anne
Uh-huh.
Baxter
Uh-huh.
obviously plays Moses's stepmother, who draws him from the Nile and brings him into Pharaoh's family. So that's how I know Anne Baxter.
Wow, you know the Ten Commandments way better than I do. You probably know the Ten Commandments better than I do. But
I probably have kept them better than you have.
hey, whoa, hey.
Hey, if it
I know
was
where the bodies are buried, you don't. But
as an evangelical Christian, it is my duty to judge you.
I feel blessed. Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean she's great. I cannot claim to be as well versed. But then if I look at her filmography, I've seen a bunch of her movies. I've seen The Magnificent Amsons and Five Graves to Cairo, and I Confess, and I have seen The Ten Commandments and all of that stuff. And she's brilliant in this.
Yeah.
You know, where you see how her character evolves. You are completely taken in hook, line, and sinker by her sort of small town, wide-eyed, you know,
Yeah. Well,
sort of facade. And it's only later when you realize, oh, hang on, she's full of
yeah.
shit.
And she does this wonderfully well in Ten Commandments too. This is something I realized between the two roles she does really well, is the person who is all smiley and I can love on you and do all this, but the minute you cross me, those claws come out so fast it'll make your head spin. And so she does that brilliantly, both in the Ten Commandments and in All About Eve.
I wonder what she was like in person. Whether I wouldn't want to judge. I don't know much about
Yeah,
her,
I
but
don't either. I don't as either. So James, where in
the pantheon.
in the pantheon of, I think we're up to the 23rd Oscars?
Yeah, this is the 23rd Academy Awards that
Yes.
took place obviously in early 1951.
What was
Where
it
yeah,
going against? Yeah.
okay, so All About Eve made history. It got the most nominations of any film up to that point. It got 14 nominations, which I believe is still the record. It was recently equaled by La La Land, which got 14 nominations as
Okay.
well. But no film has ever been nominated more than 14 times. It only won 6 on the night. And I
Okay.
think that one of the most interesting areas where it kind of became the victim of its own success is in the actress categories, ironically, which is arguably its greatest strength, because it also made history on that night by being the first film ever to get 4 actress nominations, 2 in
Oh,
Best Actress and 2 in Best Supporting Actress. But I think the result of that is that in both cases it split the vote.
and it
The,
lost
the
out.
two
They
actresses
cannibalized it. Yeah.
It did. It did. So in Best Actress, Anne Baxter went up against Bette Davis, and they both lost. And in Best Supporting Actress, Celeste Holm and Thelma Ritter went up against each other, and similarly, they both lost. And I think that that's probably why. I think people were
Sure.
just torn between how to do it, which is interesting because you see more and more today these claims of category fraud. Where
Yeah.
you've got like 2 stars of the movie, and they split them, and they'll put one
Mhm.
in best and one in supporting, and that's normally why. It's so that they can both get voted on. And I think it's examples like this where you see the problem. I mean, in fact, the last time I can really remember it happening was Thelma and Louise, where
Okay.
Gina Davis and Susan Sarandon both got nominated as Best Actress, and I think
Yeah.
that the same thing happened, and they both lost out to.
It's funny, before you
Jodie
mentioned
Foster.
that was the first thought that came in. I was trying some kind of recollection. Thelma and Louise came up in my head just before you mentioned it, but I wasn't sure enough that I was going to say anything. But
So yeah, I mean, so if Thelma and Louise came out today, it would be different. You'd probably have Susan Sarandon in Best Actress and Gina Davis in supporting. You see it in like Training Day or Brokeback Mountain or any of these movies. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a recent example.
Oh yeah, Brad Pitt and Leonardo
Brad Pitt
DiCaprio.
won, but arguably he's co-lead rather than supporting. So
yeah,
it's just a strategy that has been implemented now, and I get it, so that you can vote for both of them. But here, so it completely. So arguably, it's kind of thematically appropriate that. In her quest for an Oscar, Anne Baxter took Bette Davis down, but at her own expense, as well. Where it did win was Best Picture, Best Director for Joseph Mankiewicz. That's 2 in a row for Joseph Mankiewicz because he won the previous year for Letter to Three Women, because All the King's Men won Best Picture, but lost out in Best Director to Joseph Mankiewicz. So that's 2 in a row for Joseph Mankiewicz. That doesn't happen very, very often. He's obviously the brother of Herman Mank, who wrote
Mank. I was going to ask. Actually, I was confused because I'm thinking, is this Mank? And then you just clarified it for me.
No,
it's the brother.
He is the younger brother. Yes. Herman Mankiewicz is his older brother who wrote Citizen Kane. Yes. And it also won Best Screen, but he also won Best Screenplay. And actually, he had done the same. He did that the previous year as well. So Joseph Mankiewicz is the real sort of star here, if you like. He won Director of Screenplay 2 years in a row. Bang, bang.
The screenplay is so tight. It's so good. It's so self-aware. It really knows its place. It knows the material. And there's so many throwaway lines in this film, James, that I was left with, oh, that was brilliant. There'll be a line, and all TV is auditioning is the one I remember off the top of my head, but there's a number of lines similar to that in this film that I just thought, someone who is a total insider is just throwing these in. There's innuendo in this film that is so brilliantly done for a 1950s movie. The thematic elements could easily be transplanted into 2024.
Absolutely.
I mean, the screenplay is timeless and well-deserved Oscar win.
Yeah, and what's the other night where Bette Davis says at the parties, like, strap in, it's going to be a bumpy night or something like that, which is one of those lines you see in sort of greatest quotes from Hollywood montages for decades and decades to come. It's there's some great stuff there. So it also won for its costume design and for sound recording, costume design at a time when black and white and color were still split. So there were 2 awards available because of that.
Did George Saunders not get nominated for Best Supporting Actor?
He won. Yeah.
He did win.
So he won. So I completely shot past that. So George Saunders won for this, and rightly
well-deserved, so. George. Well-deserved.
Damn right. Yeah. And again, I mean, that feels thematically appropriate. He's the guy who will endure and weather the storm. All of these women, these crazy kind of like glory hunting women all around who are like just cannibalizing each other, and he'll just coast through the middle and just win. It all feels kind of, right.
Actually, that's brilliant. Actually, James, that's so right, because I'm just thinking that character in the film. There's so much chaos surrounding him, of which he inflames that chaos.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He creates the chaos, but it's almost like the devil, and he walks just gently through the chaos, and he emerges on the other side. There's wreckage behind, but I endure.
He remains unscathed. Yes, his reputation. Yeah, so it's kind of a brilliant example of life imitating art where in its Oscar night. I wonder if that was commented on at the time. I'm sure it was. So in terms of this is interesting, in terms of what it was up against. As previously mentioned, Sunset Boulevard.
Okay.
which is tough because I think that's another of those movies that completely
Yeah.
endures to this day. Everybody loves Billy Wilder's
Yeah.
great sort of Hollywood film noir. So I
Yeah.
love that movie. That's
And
a
Gloria
brilliant, brilliant.
Swanson. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the great examples of a film being narrated by a character that is dead. You know, that film
Yeah.
opens with is it William Holden? Yeah, William Holden's body just floating in the
Yeah.
pool, and he's like, "That's
Okay.
me."
Yeah.
It's like
It's
almost
like
like record scratch moments. It's like, how did I get here? You know,
it's like a Kevin Spacey in American Beauty.
very much so. Although in that case, I don't think you know that he's dead, do you? He's just kind of lying there serenely, and I
No, I
don't
thought he
think it's.
says doesn't he say at the beginning, I'm going to be killed or I'm going to be dead in the next,
Oh, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah,
something like
maybe.
that. I'm pretty sure
This
he
is the
starts
last
it
day of
out
my life.
with, yeah, something
Maybe.
like that. Yeah, you know he's going to die. So that's
Okay.
the whole thing, is how is this suburban guy going to die?
But yeah, so that's so Sunset Boulevard, King Solomon's Mines.
Never saw
Uh,
that.
I'm not sure if I've seen this version of it. I mean, I've only seen is it Richard
Richard
Chamberlain, that
Chamberlain,
version?
that's the one
I've
I've
seen
seen. Yeah.
I've seen that version, but I don't think I've seen this one. Father of the Bride,
Oh,
the
Spencer
original
Tracy.
version with
Yeah.
Spencer Tracy. I don't know if I've seen that either.
Yeah.
And
I've seen it. It's good. It's good.
and then Born Yesterday, starring Broderick Crawford, who won
Mhm.
and William Holden, who had just so William Holden was in two Best Picture nominees that year. Good for you, William
Yeah.
Holden. Born Yesterday, I do not know. George Cukor movie, okay, all right.
Yeah.
So it's got caliber to it. And then so yeah, any other big best actor that year was a good category. I mean, there was nobody from All About Eve in that category. Jose Ferrer won for Cyrano de Bergerac, but it also had
Yeah.
William Holden for Sunset Boulevard, Jimmy Stewart for Harvey, Spencer Tracy, Father of the Bride, and Louis Calhern for The Magnificent Yankee. But yeah, they're solid. So it was Judy Holliday for Born Yesterday who won out in Best Actress
Wow.
over Anne Baxter and Bette Davis, as well as Gloria Swanson for Sunset Boulevard. I mean, who watches Born Yesterday today?
I was going to say I would have thought if Ann Baxter and Bette Davis canceled each other out, it should have gone to Gloria Swanson.
You would think, right?
Yeah.
But no.
But we were
George,
not an Academy of Voter in 1950, you know.
no, we were not. George Sanders, yeah, won, and I think that's great. And Josephine Hull for Harvey.
I've never seen Harvey, and that's another movie I've always wanted to see.
You know what? I'm not sure that I have either. And it's been in the news a lot lately because there are all these things about imaginary friends.
Yes.
You know, like If and Eric, the Netflix
Yeah.
show and things like that. And they're all very much of a piece. If references Harvey throughout. So
James, where
yes.
does All About Eve stand in the pantheon of every Best Pictures? Does it stand the test of time? Does it deserve its place in Oscar history? I think I started this by saying, yeah.
It absolutely does. I mean, like we said, it still holds the record for the most number of nominations. So for that, for that alone, does it deserve its place? Yeah, because it's unbeaten. It's been tied, but it's unbeaten. And it's great. As we've said, it's a timeless story that is still as barbed and satirical and witty and as well observed today as it ever has been. So yes, and yes, easy.
Yeah. I mean, I said just coming off of 1949, I watch a film in these categories and I immediately think, oh, solid film. Don't know why it won Best Picture, or wow, fantastic film. Totally understand how it won Best Picture. All About Eve is in the latter category. All the King's Men in the former.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, You could raise a slight question with Sunset Boulevard, but I guess that's just one of those films that has matured over time.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a little too bleak and on the nose for Hollywood voters at the time.
Maybe. Anyhow, that's how James and I see All About Eve, but maybe you have a different thought, a different perspective. We would love to enter a conversation with you. Go ahead and drop a comment in the comment box below. James?
That's right. I mean, yeah. Do you love All About Eve? Do you agree with us? Are you as big a George Sanders fan? What's the great George Sanders performance that we have not seen or not mentioned today? And as we talked about Bette Davis, where to start with Bette Davis? Please let me know. Her younger performances, basically.
Start with the song, Bette Davis Eyes, man.
Now that I do know.
Yeah, me too. And now after watching this film, I know why that song came out. It's got incredible eyes. Anyhow, till next episode.
Bye-bye.
Boom, another one in the can.
You ought to be